first time Orpheus played his lyre, the mountains wept. Not metaphorically, as poets might say when describing lesser musicians, but literally. Streams of crystalline tears cascaded down granite faces, pooling in valleys that had never known water. Ancient oaks bent their mighty crowns in reverence, their leaves shimmering with a music so pure it made the wind itself pause to listen. Wild beasts emerged from hidden lairs, predator and prey, walking side by side, unified in their wonder. Even the stones beneath his feet hummed in harmony, their cold hearts awakened by melodies that seemed to flow not from his fingers, but from the very essence of creation itself. This was no ordinary music. This was the song of souls, the rhythm of heartbeats, the melody of love and loss intertwined, and the man who wielded such power, tall, ethereal, with eyes that held the depth of starless nights, and hair that caught sunlight like spun gold, was both blessed and cursed by the gods. Orpheus was born of music itself. His father, Apollo, god of the arts and light, had gifted him with a voice that could mend broken hearts, or shatter them entirely. His mother, Calliope, the muse of epic poetry, had breathed into him the power to weave words into spells that could move the very foundations of the earth. But it was his stepfather, the river god Oiagras, who taught him the most important lesson of all, that true music comes not from divine blood or cosmic inheritance, but from the depths of human experience, from joy so pure it transcends the mortal realm, and from sorrow so profound it echoes in the halls of eternity. The gift and the burden. From childhood, Orpheus understood that his gift was both miracle and burden. When he sang lullabies, babies would sleep so peacefully they forgot to cry for days. When he hummed while walking through markets, merchants would forget to collect payment, lost in dreams of distant shores and forgotten loves. When he played at festivals, grown men would weep openly, remembering mothers they had lost, loves they had abandoned, dreams they had buried beneath the weight of ordinary living. The lyre itself was no ordinary instrument, crafted by Hermes from the shell of a tortoise and strung with silver threads spun by the fates themselves. It resonated with the fundamental frequencies of existence. Each string held the power to touch a different aspect of the soul. Love, grief, hope, despair, memory, longing. When Orpheus played, he was not merely making music. He was conducting the symphony of mortal experience, drawing forth emotions so pure and raw that listeners often felt as though their hearts might burst from the intensity. But power without purpose is merely noise, and Orpheus wandered through his youth searching for something worthy of his gift. He traveled to distant lands, studying with the wisest teachers, learning the secret names of things, the hidden connections between sound and spirit. He could make flowers bloom with a single note, call rain from cloudless skies with a melody, even coax the dead to whisper their secrets from beyond the veil. Yet still, something was missing. A reason, a meaning, a heart to pour his music into. The meeting. It was in a meadow outside Thrace, where wild thyme grew thick as carpet, and larks sang their hearts out to the morning sun, that Orpheus first saw Eurydice. She was dancing, not the calculated movements of a trained performer, but the spontaneous expression of pure joy, her bare feet barely touching the earth as she spun through shafts of golden light. Her laughter was music itself, bubbling up from depths of happiness that seemed inexhaustible. She was a dryad, a tree nymph whose very existence was bound to the great oak that stood sentinel at the meadow's heart. Her skin held the warm bronze of sun-dappled bark. Her hair flowed like autumn leaves caught in an eternal breeze, and her eyes reflected the deep green wisdom of forests that had witnessed 1,000 seasons. When she danced, flowers bloomed in her footsteps. When she laughed, birds forgot their own songs to listen to hers. Orpheus stood transfixed at the meadow's edge, his lyre forgotten in his hands. For the first time in his life, he encountered something more beautiful than his own music, not because it competed with his art, but because it completed it. Eurydice was the missing piece, the heart his songs had been searching for, the reason his gift existed. When she noticed him watching, she didn't flee as other nymphs might have done. Instead, she tilted her head with curious grace, studying this strange young man who stood so still among the dancing wildflowers. "You're the one who makes the mountains cry," she said, her voice carrying the rustle of leaves and the whisper of wind through branches. "Only when they need to," Orpheus replied, surprising himself with the steadiness of his own voice. Sometimes tears are the only honest response to beauty. She laughed, and the sound made his chest tight with the unnamed longing. "Then why aren't you weeping now?" The question caught him off guard. He looked down at his hands, then back at her face, radiant in the morning light. "Because," he said slowly, "I'm afraid that if I start, I might never stop." The courtship. Their courtship was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Where other lovers exchanged gifts of gold or flowers, Orpheus and Eurydice traded melodies and movements, songs and dances that seemed to rewrite the very laws of nature around them. When Orpheus played his lyre, Eurydice would dance, her movements giving physical form to his invisible music. When she moved through the forest, he would follow with harmonies that matched her steps, creating symphonies of motion and sound that left the natural world forever changed. Trees learned new ways to bend in the wind. Rivers discovered rhythms they had never known. Even the seasons began to shift in response to their love, spring arriving early when they were happy, autumn lingering when they were melancholy, as if the earth itself had become an instrument in their cosmic duet. They were perfect opposites who created perfect harmony. Where Orpheus was ethereal and otherworldly, Eurydice was grounded and real, her feet always connected to the earth that sustained her. Where she was spontaneous and wild, he was thoughtful and deliberate, each note carefully chosen, each word precisely placed. Where he could move the hearts of gods and mortals alike, she could move his heart completely. In the evenings, they would sit beneath her oak tree, ancient and wise beyond memory, and Orpheus would play softly, while Eurydice wove flowers into crowns that would never wilt as long as his music lasted. She told him stories of the deep woods, of the secret lives of trees, and the gossip of streams. He sang her tales of distant lands, of heroes and monsters, of gods who walked among mortals, and mortals who dared to love immortals. "Do you ever wonder," Eurydice asked one twilight, as fireflies began their nightly dance around them, "what it would be like to love someone ordinary?" Orpheus considered this, his fingers finding gentle chords on his lyre. I wonder what it would be like to be ordinary, he admitted, to make music that doesn't move mountains, to love someone without the weight of destiny pressing down on every moment. She leaned against his shoulder, her warmth anchoring him to the present moment. But then we might never have found each other. Then I choose the extraordinary, he whispered, pressing his lips to the crown of her head. I choose the mountains, and the weight, and the destiny. If it means I choose you. The wedding. Their wedding was a celebration that lasted 3 days and transformed the very landscape around them. Gods descended from Olympus to witness the union, their divine presence making the air shimmer with power. Mortals traveled from distant lands, drawn by rumors of a celebration that would be remembered for all time. Nymphs and satyrs, centaurs and fauns, all the wild children of the forest, came to honor one of their own. Apollo himself played the wedding march, his golden lyre harmonizing with his son's silver one, in music so beautiful that time seemed to pause. The 9 muses sang the blessing, their voices weaving together in harmonies that spoke of love eternal and unbreakable. Hymen, god of marriage, lit the sacred flame that would burn as long as their love endured, a flame that blazed so bright it could be seen from the highest peaks of Mount Olympus. Eurydice wore a gown woven from moonbeams and morning mist, her hair crowned with flowers that bloomed fresh with each step she took. Orpheus, dressed in robes that seemed to shift between the colors of sunrise and sunset, had never looked more divine. When they spoke their vows, their words became visible in the air, silver threads of promise that wound around them both, binding them not just in marriage, but in destiny. I will love you beyond the boundaries of life, Orpheus vowed, his voice carrying to every corner of the gathered crowd. Beyond the reach of death, beyond the span of eternity itself, I will dance to your music until the stars forget their courses, Eurydice replied, her voice steady despite the tears of joy streaming down her face. Until the mountains crumble and the seas run dry. The kiss that sealed their union created a shock wave of pure emotion that rippled outward from the meadow, touching every living thing for miles around. Flowers bloomed out of season, birds burst into spontaneous song, and even the stones sang softly of love triumphant. But in the shadows beyond the celebration's light, something darker stirred, for even the most perfect love draws the attention of forces that feed on perfection's destruction, and the happiness of Orpheus and Eurydice was too pure, too complete, to escape the notice of those who dwell in the spaces between joy and sorrow. The shadow falls. For one perfect year, they lived as if they were the only 2 souls in existence. Their love had transformed the very nature of their domain. The meadow had become a paradise where winter never touched, where streams ran with water that tasted of starlight, where the air itself seemed to hum with contentment. Orpheus composed his greatest works during this time, melodies so moving that they became part of the fabric of reality itself, woven into the wind and the rain and the turning of seasons. But perfection, as any student of the gods knows, is not meant for mortal realms. It began with the small things, a discordant note in the morning bird song, a flower that bloomed black among the roses, a whisper in the wind that spoke words in no language of earth or heaven. Eurydice, whose connection to the natural world made her sensitive to such disturbances, felt the change first. "Something is coming," she told Orpheus one evening as they sat beneath their oak. The tree's leaves, usually a vibrant green even in winter, had begun to show touches of premature autumn. "I can feel it in the earth, in the water, in the very air we breathe." Orpheus set down his lyre and took her hands in his. They were trembling, though, whether from cold or fear. He could not tell what kind of something. "Hunger," she whispered, "ancient and patient and vast. It has been waiting, watching, learning the shape of our happiness, so it knows exactly how to destroy it." He should have listened, should have packed their few belongings and fled to distant lands, should have sought the protection of his divine father, should have done anything but what he did, which was to hold her close and promise that his music would protect them, that love as pure as theirs could not be touched by darkness. "No force in heaven or earth or the spaces between," he swore, "will take you from me." But even as he spoke the words, both of them felt the cold breath of fate on their necks, the whisper of destinies that had been written in stars before either of them was born. For Orpheus had spoken truly when he vowed to love her beyond death, and the universe, with its cruel sense of irony, was about to hold him to that promise. The serpent's kiss. The hunter who brought death to paradise had a name whispered only in the darkest corners of the world. Aristeus, son of Apollo, and the nymph Cyrene. He was Orpheus's half-brother, though neither acknowledged the kinship that flowed through their divine blood. Where Orpheus had inherited their father's gift for music and light, Aristeus had received the darker aspects of Apollo's nature, the relentless pursuit, the inability to accept rejection, the terrible pride that turned love into possession. Saturday had been watching them for months, hidden in the deep shadows that even Orpheus's radiant music could not fully banish. What had begun as mere curiosity about his famous half-brother had curdled into obsession when he first saw Eurydice dance. Her wild beauty, her untamed spirit, her complete devotion to another, all of it inflamed him with a desire that consumed rational thought. On the day that would shatter the world, Aristeus approached Eurydice while Orpheus was away, consulting with the oracle at Delphi about troubling dreams that had plagued them both. The morning was perfect, crystalline with spring promise, and Eurydice was gathering herbs in the meadow where she and Orpheus had first met. She hummed as she worked, one of her husband's melodies transformed by her voice into something entirely new, entirely hers. "Beautiful Eurydice," Aristeus called, stepping from the tree line with the casual grace of a predator. "Dance for me as you dance for him." She looked up, her hands stilling on the lavender she had been gathering. There was something in his eyes that made the flowers in her hair begin to wilt, something that set every instinct screaming warnings through her immortal blood. "I dance only for my husband," she replied, her voice steady despite the fear beginning to coil in her chest. "And for myself, when the mood takes me. But surely one dance would not be such a betrayal." His smile was Apollo's smile turned cruel, all light and no warmth. "I am, after all, your husband's brother. We share the same divine blood. Blood means nothing without honor," Eurydice said, rising to her feet with the fluid grace that had first captured Orpheus's heart. "And honor means respecting the bonds others have chosen. The rejection hit Aristeas like a physical blow. He had expected coyness, perhaps even initial resistance that would melt away under his divine charm. He had not expected this absolute, unwavering loyalty, this complete dismissal of his very existence as anything more than an unwelcome intrusion. Then, I will take what should be freely given, he snarled, lunging forward with inhuman speed. Eurydice ran. She fled through the meadow where she had found love, past the stream where she and Orpheus had shared their first kiss, toward the deep woods where ancient magic still held sway, and where she might find sanctuary among her sister nymphs. Her feet, so sure in dance, found every root and stone as she ran, her breath coming in desperate gasps that misted in the suddenly cold air. Behind her, she could hear Aristeas crashing through the underbrush, his divine nature allowing him to match her speed despite his size. His voice followed her. Promises and threats mingled into a stream of words that polluted the very air they touched. She might have escaped, should have escaped, would have, if not for the serpent. It lay coiled in the tall grass beside the path. She knew by heart, a creature so ancient that it remembered the first days of the world, when chaos and order fought their initial battles. Its scales were black as the space between stars. Its eyes held the cold intelligence of something that had watched empires rise and fall with perfect indifference. It was not evil, as mortals understand evil. It was simply part of the fundamental nature of things, the reminder that all beauty contains the seed of its own destruction. As Eurydice's bare foot touched the earth beside its coil, the serpent struck with the inevitability of winter following autumn. Its fangs sank deep into her ankle, injecting venom that was older than sorrow, more patient than time itself. She fell among the wild flowers, her blood mingling with the earth that had sustained her for so many centuries. The last thing she saw before the poison claimed her was Aristeas bursting from the tree line, his face shifting from triumph to horror as he realized what his pursuit had caused. "No," he whispered, dropping to his knees beside her still form. "This was not. I only wanted." But want, as any student of tragedy knows, cares nothing for intention. The serpent had already vanished into the tall grass. Its purpose served, leaving behind only the terrible silence that follows the shattering of perfect things. When Orpheus returned from Delphi 3 hours later, he found his wife's body cradled in his half-brother's arms, surrounded by flowers that had wilted in perfect sympathy with her passing. Aristeas looked up with eyes that held the desperate hope of a child caught in wrongdoing, seeking forgiveness that no power in heaven or earth could grant. "She was running," he stammered. "I only wanted to speak with her, to see her dance, and she ran. And the serpent—" He never finished the sentence. Orpheus's cry of anguish, raw and primal and infinite, sent shockwaves rippling across the countryside. Mountains cracked, rivers changed their courses, and every bird, for 100 miles, fell silent in sympathy. When the echoes finally faded, Aristeas found himself alone with the body of the woman whose death he had caused, while somewhere in the distance, the sound of a lyre began. Not the joyous melodies of before, but something darker, deeper, filled with a grief so profound it seemed to pull shadows from the very air. The journey begins. For 7 days and 7 nights, Orpheus played his lament beside Eurydice's body. No food passed his lips, no sleep touched his eyes, no word fell from his mouth save her name, sung in endless variation, as if the sound itself might call her back from the gray realm of the dead. His music during those days was unlike anything the world had ever heard, not the controlled beauty of his wedding songs, but raw emotion given voice, grief so pure it became its own form of prayer. The very earth wept in response. Springs that had run clear for millennia turned bitter with salt tears. Animals forgot to hunt or forage, transfixed by sorrow that seemed to emanate from the ground itself. Even the gods on Olympus fell silent, awed by the depth of mortal love revealed in its moment of ultimate loss. On the 8th day, as dawn broke gray and cold over the meadow where their perfect love had bloomed, Orpheus finally set down his lyre and looked upon his wife's face with eyes that held the terrible clarity of absolute despair. She was still beautiful, more beautiful perhaps than she had been in life, touched now with the marble perfection of death. But she was gone, utterly and completely. Her spirit fled to realms where mortal love could not follow. Or, so the living believed. "I will bring you back," he whispered, his voice hoarse from days of singing. "I will descend to the very depths of Hades itself, and I will play such music that the dead will weep to hear it. I will make Persephone remember what it was to love before she was queen of shadows. I will make Hades himself understand that some bonds transcend even death." It was madness, of course. No living soul had ever entered the underworld and returned. The paths that led to that gray realm were guarded by monsters that fed on hope itself, and the rulers of the dead were not known for their mercy toward the living who dared disturb their domain. But love, as poets have observed, makes madmen of us all. And Orpheus had love enough to challenge the fundamental order of existence. He built a pyre of wood from her oak tree, the ancient sentinel that had watched over their courtship and their marriage. As the flames consumed her mortal form, he played her favorite melody one last time, weaving into it all his memories of her laughter, her dance, her voice calling his name across the flower-drunk meadows. The smoke that rose from the fire carried with it something more than mere ash. It carried the essence of their love itself, a silver thread that stretched beyond the visible world into realms where only the desperate and the divine dared venture. When the last ember died, Orpheus shouldered his lyre and turned his face toward the setting sun, toward the western lands where ancient maps marked the entrance to the underworld, with symbols that hurt the eye to look upon. He did not look back at the meadow where they had been happy, did not pause to gather provisions for the journey ahead. What need had he for mortal sustenance when his heart was already dead within his chest? The descent. The entrance to Hades lay hidden in a grove of black poplars beside the river Acheron, where the water ran dark as old blood, and no bird dared sing. The trees here were wrong somehow, too tall, too straight, their leaves whispering secrets in languages that predated human speech. The very air tasted of endings, of final breaths and last words, of all the sorrow that mortal hearts could hold. Charon, the ferryman of the dead, looked up from his eternal labor as Orpheus approached the riverbank. He was ancient beyond measure, his face a map of every soul he had carried across the dark waters, his eyes holding depths that reflected the accumulated grief of millennia. "Turn back, son of music," the ferryman said, his voice like the grinding of stones beneath deep water. "This river carries only the dead, and you still burn with the fever of life." "Then let me be the first exception," Orpheus replied, drawing his lyre from his shoulder. "Let me sing you the song of perfect love destroyed, and tell me if such grief does not earn passage among the dead." Before Karen could object, Orpheus began to play. The melody that rose from his strings was loss, given form, love transformed into longing so pure, it cut through the gray mist that perpetually shrouded the river. He sang of Eurydice's laugh, of the way sunlight had played in her hair, of the perfect harmony they had created together. He sang of the serpent's strike, of the silence that had followed, of the terrible emptiness that now lived where his heart had been. Each note carried the weight of personal apocalypse, the end of a world that had existed only for two souls who loved beyond reason. As the music swelled, impossible things began to happen. The black waters of the Acheron ran clear for the first time since the world began. The poplars straightened their bent backs and reached toward a sky they had not seen in eons. Even Charon himself felt tears, actual tears, cutting silver tracks down his ancient cheeks. "Bored," the ferryman whispered, when the last note faded into the mist. "But know that the return journey is not guaranteed, even for one who sings like the gods themselves." The boat that carried them across was wreathed in silence more profound than death. On the far shore, creatures of nightmare stirred at their approach. Cerberus, the three-headed hound who guarded the entrance to the underworld proper, his massive form tense with the anticipation of violence. But when Orpheus played his lament again, the great beast whimpered like a lost puppy, each of his three heads bowing in acknowledgement of grief greater than his own fury. Deeper they traveled, through caverns where the walls wept endlessly, past fields where the shades of the restless dead wandered in eternal confusion. At every threshold, monsters barred their way. The Furies with their whips of flame, the Harpies with their claws like rusted iron, beings of pure malice whose only purpose was to prevent the living from disturbing the peace of the dead. But Orpheus's music tamed them all, transforming fury into pity, malice into mourning, until even the most terrible guardians of the underworld stepped aside with something approaching reverence. The Court of Shadows. The throne room of Hades stretched beyond the reach of mortal vision, its ceiling lost in darkness that seemed to press down with the weight of all the sorrows that had ever been felt. Pillars of black marble, each carved with the names of the dead, supported a vault where no light had ever shone save the cold radiance that emanated from the throne itself. Hades sat in judgment upon that throne, carved from a single block of volcanic glass that reflected not light, but shadow, making him appear to be built from darkness itself. He was terrible and beautiful, in the way that endings are beautiful, final, inevitable, perfect, in their absolute conclusion. Beside him, on a throne of silver that seemed to hold all the light their realm possessed, sat Persephone, queen of the dead, her face holding the complex beauty of one who had known both the joy of spring meadows and the weight of winter's crown. "A living soul enters our realm," Hades spoke, his voice like the grinding of continental plates, like the slow collapse of mountains into dust. "How do you dare, son of Apollo? to walk among the dead while life still burns within your veins. Orpheus knelt before the twin thrones, his lyre cradled in his arms like a child. I dare because love compels me, Lord of the Underworld. I have come to reclaim what was taken before its time. Nothing is taken before its time, Persephone said softly, and in her voice was the whisper of pomegranate seeds and the promise of return that never quite fulfills itself. The fates weave their patterns according to laws older than the gods. To unpick their work is to risk unraveling the very fabric of existence. Then let existence unravel, Orpheus replied, raising his eyes to meet hers. Let the stars fall from their courses and the seas boil away to nothing. What meaning does any of it have without love to give it purpose? He began to play then, there in the heart of the underworld, surrounded by the accumulated grief of all who had ever died. But this was not the wild lament he had played for the guardians. This was something altogether more dangerous. This was love itself transformed into music. Every moment of joy he had shared with Eurydice, distilled into notes that carried the very essence of what it meant to be alive. He played their first meeting, and the throne room filled with the scent of wild thyme and the sound of laughter. He played their courtship, and phantom flowers began to bloom in the cracks between the marble stones. He played their wedding, and for one impossible moment, the eternal darkness of the underworld was touched by sunlight that had no source, warmth that had no cause save the memory of perfect happiness. But it was when he played of loss, of the serpent's strike, of holding her lifeless form, of the terrible silence that had followed, that the true power of his music was revealed. For in that moment, he made even the rulers of the dead understand what it meant to love something so completely that its absence became a wound that could never heal. Persephone wept openly, her tears falling like silver rain on the stone floor, each drop carrying with it the memory of her own spring meadows, her own stolen happiness. Even Hades, lord of endings, felt something stir in the region where his heart had once been. Not quite emotion, but the echo of what emotion had been before the weight of eternity had pressed it from his soul. Enough, Hades whispered, when the last note faded into silence. We have heard your petition, mortal, and it moves us more than we care to admit. The dead do not return to the world of the living. This is the law that governs all existence. But he paused, and in that pause hung the weight of possibilities that could reshape the very nature of reality. Your love has touched even our cold hearts, Persephone continued. We will grant you this. Your wife's shade may follow you back to the world above, but know that the price of this mercy comes with conditions that test the very foundation of the trust you claim to share. The impossible condition. She will walk behind you, Hades intoned, his voice carrying the finality of carved stone. Her footsteps will be silent, for the dead make no sound in the world of the living. You will not hear her breathing, for breath has left her forever. You will feel no touch of her hand, for death has made her incorporeal to all save the most desperate longing. And you must not, under any circumstance, for any reason, no matter what doubt or fear assails you, turn to look upon her until you both stand in the full light of the sun above. The condition struck Orpheus like a physical blow, to walk ahead of Eurydice, unable to see her face, unable to confirm her presence save through faith alone. It was a test designed to break even the strongest will, for how could he be certain she followed? How could he trust that the rulers of the dead, notorious for their cruel tricks, had truly released her spirit? How could he walk the dark paths of the underworld without the comfort of her eyes upon him, her smile to guide his steps? If you turn even once, Persephone added softly, her voice heavy with the weight of inevitable tragedy, she will be lost to you forever, not merely returned to the realm of the dead, but cast into the deepest void where even we cannot reach. Her soul will be scattered like dust, her memory erased from the very fabric of existence. This is the price of doubt, the cost of looking back when faith demands you look forward. But know this as well, Hades continued. She will be there, behind you, following as faithfully as she followed your music in life. Her love for you burns as bright in death as it did in the meadow where you found each other. Trust in that love, and you will walk together beneath the sun once more. Orpheus felt something within him crack at the impossibility of what they asked, to love someone so completely and yet be forbidden to confirm their presence. It was asking him to have the faith of gods while possessing only the flawed heart of a mortal man. But what choice did he have? To leave her here in the gray realm of the dead was unthinkable. To never again hear her laugh, see her dance, feel her hand in his. It was a fate worse than any death he could imagine. I accept, he whispered, the words falling from his lips like stones into deep water. I will trust in love when trust seems madness. I will have faith when faith defies reason. Persephone gestured toward the shadows that pooled at the far end of the throne room, and from those shadows stepped a figure that made Orpheus's heart stop and restart within his chest. Eurydice, pale as morning mist, translucent as captured starlight, but unmistakably, impossibly her. She smiled at him, that same wild, joyous smile that had first stolen his reason in the flower-drunk meadow. And though no sound escaped her lips, he could see her mouth forming the words, "My love, go," Hades commanded. "Begin your journey before our mercy turns to regret, before we remember why the laws that govern death exist. And remember, she follows, but you must not look." The longest journey. The path from the depths of Hades to the world above was longer ascending than it had been descending, as if the very stone conspired to test the limits of his resolve. Orpheus walked with measured steps, his lyre silent now, listening with desperate attention for any sound that might confirm Eurydice's presence behind him. But the dead make no footfalls, cast no shadows, leave no trace of their passage save in the hearts of those who love them. At first, faith came easily, the joy of knowing she followed, the certainty that love had conquered even death itself, carried him forward with steps that seemed to barely touch the ground. He could almost feel her presence, not quite physical, but something deeper, the resonance of souls that had learned to move in perfect harmony. The darkness around them seemed less oppressive, the weight of the underworld less crushing, as if her spirit brought with it some echo of the sunlight she had loved in life. But as they climbed through caverns where the walls wept endlessly, past pools of black water that reflected no light, through tunnels that seemed to stretch beyond the boundaries of mortal endurance, doubt began its insidious work, the silence behind him grew heavier with each step, more complete, more terrible. Was she really there? Had the rulers of the dead honored their bargain, or was he climbing alone, pursuing a phantom, born of his own desperate need? He tried to focus on memories, the sound of her laughter, the way she moved when she thought no one was watching, the feel of her hand in his during those perfect evenings beneath her oak tree. But memories, he discovered, could be as cruel as they were comforting. For what if memories were all he had left? What if he was climbing toward the light with nothing behind him but the echo of his own footsteps and the weight of self-deception? The guardians they passed on their ascent watched with expressions of something that might have been pity. Cerberus whimpered softly as they passed, his three heads following some presence that Orpheus could not see. The Furies stepped aside with uncharacteristic gentleness, their terrible eyes fixed on something just behind his left shoulder. Even Charon, waiting at his ferry, nodded with grave respect toward empty air. But what if they too were part of the deception? What if the rulers of the underworld had commanded their servants to play along with this cruel charade, allowing a mortal man to believe he had won back his love while leading him slowly toward a heartbreak more complete than any death? "Speak to me," he whispered once, the words torn from him by desperation. "Give me some sign, some sound, some proof that you are there." But no answer came, for the dead cannot speak in the realm between worlds, cannot touch or call or whisper comfort to those who doubt. The silence stretched on, perfect and terrible, until Orpheus began to wonder if he had imagined the entire bargain, if grief had finally driven him to the madness that claimed all who loved too deeply. Halfway to the surface, in a cavern where phosphorescent fungi provided the first light they had seen since leaving the throne room, Orpheus stopped. The temptation to turn, to look, to confirm what his heart knew, but his mind questioned, was almost overwhelming. Just one glance. Surely one moment of doubt could be forgiven. Surely love as pure as theirs could survive a single instant of human weakness. But he remembered Persephone's words, scattered like dust, erased from existence, lost beyond all possibility of recovery. The stakes were not merely losing her again. They were losing her completely, forever, in ways that made death seem like a gentle mercy. He forced himself forward, step by agonizing step, climbing toward a light that seemed to retreat even as he approached it.